Well, here we go again. The reality of this carbon dioxide tax is starting to emerge, this time on the cost of electricity, as if we haven't been hit hard enough already. According to the industry, we're now going to be hit with electricity prices predicted to spike up 20%, and that is just in the first year. 20%. It'll mean for many power bills that are double that of just 5 years ago. So if that's right, and if your electricity bill is around, say, $200 a quarter, you'll be looking at a quarterly bill closer to the $250 mark. That's an extra $200 per year. And just on electricity, the compensation package is being swallowed up pretty damn fast, I would have thought. Not to mention making that University of Canberra modelling we spoke about earlier on in the week look completely and utterly off the pace. And it's all because our Prime Minister wants a price on carbon. And worse, because no one seems to have clearly thought through the model and the impact and the fallout from the tax. Even Treasury has refused now to make their detailed modelling public. Professor Henry Ergas is one of Australia's leading economists. He's written about this today in today's Australian. He joins me on the line. Good afternoon, Professor Ergas.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very, very well. Thank you for your time once again. You came out publicly and addressed that problem that the carbon model's Treasury, which was used for the carbon tax analysis, was not accessible to the public. So you, I, any character can't get hold of this stuff, right?
Yes, that's correct. They disclosed the results, but they won't allow us to actually see the models and hence test those results and know what would happen if you change the assumptions that they've made.
Let's not ask why, because we think we know the answer to that. But what did they say to you as to the reason why?
Well, they haven't given a reason other than say that it's a government policy decision. So the essence of it is that we're expected to take the results on trust and that we can't see what would happen if you put in assumptions that may well be much more realistic than the assumptions that Treasury has used.
But I was under the understanding, and maybe I was reading the wrong stuff, that Treasury's most senior officials have persistently claimed that others can get hold of the detailed modelling. Is that right?
Well, they have said that. Yes, indeed, they did say that in Senate hearings, but the reality, as it has now been admitted by those officials and others, is that those statements were incorrect and that key models that they used are not, in fact, accessible to the public. Hence, we're not in a position to test the results that they've claimed and see what would happen if you instead put in other assumptions.
Okay, I'm just trying to think and be the devil's advocate for a second. Could it be a simple explanation in that it would cost the government too much to give out this kind of detail to so many people in the country?
No, that makes absolutely no sense, because researchers such as me and others are happy to pay any costs that are involved in making.
You've offered that. You've offered that.
Yes, we've offered to pay. So, in fact, this would be revenue for the taxpayers that would help defray the costs of developing those models.
That's right. Oh, what a doozy. It's obviously because they don't want to be tripped up by people like yourself.
Well, I imagine so, because there's absolutely no reason other than that why these models that, after all, have been paid for by taxpayers, why those models should not be available.
Now, earlier this week, the University of Canberra's modelling showed that the carbon tax was going to cost the average family $8.50 per week. But today, we've got the industry, the Energy Supply Association, excuse me, saying that their modelling is showing electricity alone could go up 20%. What's your gut feel?
Well, my sense of it is that the estimates that Treasury has put out, particularly for electricity prices, but more generally, those estimates are too low, particularly when you take account of other policy measures the government intends to take, such as closing the Hazelwood generator in Victoria. That will push up electricity prices by more. And also those estimates that have been put out there of the impact on households don't take account of the fact that even in Treasury's modelling, real wages decline. So households get a double hit. They get a hit from the fact that prices for goods such as electricity are rising, but they also take a hit because wages decline.
That's right, and so therefore they are less able to afford the current cost of electricity.
Indeed, and the compensation that the government has determined is solely aimed at offsetting the price increases as measured by Treasury. Now, as I've said, those price increases are likely to be an underestimate, but on top of that, households are also going to suffer from the fact that real wages decline, and for that decline, the government has offered absolutely no compensation.
Yeah. So I'm getting very frustrated hearing all of this. Is there any way we can get an accurate model of this tax analysis and what it will cost us then?
Well, I think what we will see happening over coming weeks and months is that groups such as the electricity industry will be putting out their estimates that are based on their industry knowledge, and we have to give considerable weight to those estimates. As for the estimates that Treasury and the government have come up with, until they're willing to allow others to test those results, to have access to the underlying model and to know how it is that they've generated or constructed those results, until they do that, I don't see how anyone could put a great deal of weight on their estimates.
Especially if they are not taking into consideration what we have heard as late as today from the Energy Supply Association about a 20% increase in the first year, rather than the 10% increase on which Treasury relied on.
Indeed.
Yeah. Now, you've told me on this program before that one of the difficulties in unravelling the carbon dioxide tax will be the compensation bill. Tony Abbott and his climate change spokesperson, Greg Hunt, have told me on this program that they have got advice saying that they don't need to give any compensation to anyone.
Well, I believe that the approach they're taking has two elements to it. The first element is that they intend to repeal the legislation before definitive permits have been issued, and second, that they are putting industry on notice of the fact that they intend to repeal the legislation.
Which you did last week.
Yeah, and because they put them on notice, then if they go ahead and buy these permits 2 or 3 years ahead, if they buy these permits, then they're bearing that risk, and there's no reason for taxpayers to compensate them for bearing that risk.
So does that make sense to you?
Well, it does. I think there may still be issues that will be litigated, and we'll have to see what the outcomes of that litigation are. But clearly, if industry is put on notice of the fact that the coalition intends to repeal that legislation, then that weakens any claim they could possibly make that they deserve compensation for having rushed ahead and purchased these permits.
Yeah, right. Okay. Watch that space, in other words. And I'm still waiting for a proper model of how this carbon tax will affect us. We cannot rely on what we're hearing on two fronts today. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
It's a pleasure.
Okay, there you go. Professor Henry Ergas, who we've had on the program before, talking about the potential compensation trap that is contained in the carbon dioxide tax legislation.